Okay, welcome back. Thank you all for bearing with us as we work through technology here in our virtual fair. So next up for a workshop called Unpacking Our Positionality, Dismantling Racism, we have Wholistic Resistance. And this workshop will slow down and examine our identities, observe the emotional defenses that impact a safe container, and notice whiteness in service of village building a diverse community. So this is with Britania and Aaron. And Britania, who uses she, they pronouns, is a transformative justice nerd, abolitionist, holistic singing coach, and counselor, honored to have a hand and heart in the movements to make us free. She was originally welcomed into FAIR in 2013 by the Recycling Crew, where she co-founded and leads the Care Bears, a crew mental health and advocacy group, as well as directs education and outreach efforts towards a waste-free FAIR. She is also a crisis worker at Whitebird and a member of the Diversity Committee. Her home is on unceded Kumeyaay territory, aka San Diego, where her activism spans Chicano, BIPOC, and queer community building, street medic services, sex work, humanitarian clowning, community singing, youth mentorship, and advocating for survivors of sexual violence. Gratitude to her teachers at Wholistic Resistance, at Be the Change Consulting, and Melanie Demore, who have shaped and supported her mission to fuel the intentions of underserved communities through art, relationship, and the daily practice of abolitionism. And Aaron Johnson is an earth builder, teacher of closeness, and activist. He graduated from the California Institute of the Arts in 2007 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. He made a lifelong commitment to use the skills he possesses to end racism. In addition to using intimacy and closeness to Blackness as a primary means to that end, the tools he frequently uses are speaking, teaching, singing, photography, filmmaking, and minimalism. Aaron leads a mentoring program called Turn It Up Now that focuses on elevating the power, talent, love, and work ethic of youth. He believes that deep connection is one of the most powerful tools one can use in dismantling racism. And a reminder that there is a PayPal donation link here, tip jar, if you would like to contribute. And I will be putting the request for the Zoom link in the chat if you would like to join us on Zoom, where you can participate more fully. Of course, feel free to watch it on the screen here. So now let me pull up Aaron and Britania. Take it away, y'all. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, welcome everybody. We'll request, if you feel comfortable and would like to, anybody who's here on the Zoom with us to share or to turn on your video. And yeah, just extend that invite to anybody watching on the stream to click on that Zoom and join us here in the Zoom room. And the room will stay open if people want to join. Aaron, will you kick us off with a song?
Yes. Great. Yes, before we do a song, I just want to name a little bit about singing with us. We invite you, I know you might be in your car, you might be in your living room, and you're not maybe in the same spot. I just want to welcome you to feel free to sing along with us if you would like, or sing along with this song. And I want to name that we look at singing as a birthright that everyone has access to. So in your own space, I want to invite you to be a part of this singing experience, even if you feel like you're not a singer. We look at singing as a part of who you are and a part of resistance. So that being said, I'm going to do a little singing. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. walking and talking with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Aaron. Gorgeous. I can't wait to sing with you in person.
Can't wait.
So we would love to hear some check-ins from folks. Looks like we have a couple people here on the Zoom with us. Thanks, Brooks and Yana, for being with us. So yeah, I would just love to get your names, your pronouns, and a couple words on how you're feeling.
I'm Brooks. I use he or they pronouns, either one, he, him, they, them. I'm feeling good. It's been a hectic morning for sure on this stream. And I do want to pass along, I know that the fair is having some challenges with technology broadly on the main fair site right now. And that's why there aren't more people in this Zoom right now, as they're having trouble, I think, even accessing the site. So I am recording this, just so you know, and it will be shared elsewhere as long as that's okay with both of you. But they're working on it. So I'm just passing that along.
Thank you.
But thank you for being here and being back this year, Aaron. Really appreciate it.
It's good to be back. Hopefully with you all next year. In
person, yes.
Reach for that dream.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Yana, and I use she, her pronouns. I really appreciate that song. I love that one. One of my favorite things is old spirituals and kind of moving them into modern day things, adding different beats or different, rhymes with them and whatnot. But it's something that I just feel so connects everyone. And, it's kind of like a common ground that I think is really powerful. So I definitely want to send appreciation for that. Yeah, I'm feeling good, hopeful, definitely feeling the technology issues, but I feel like we can surpass that. We've done much more difficult things this year. So I'm grateful to be here. And I've got a couple kids outside, so I might be bouncing in and out a little bit, but grateful that you guys are here.
Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, it's really special that you two are here. Brooks, Yana, and I co-led the effort to create these workshops and music experiences representing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So glad you guys are here.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for your work.
So a word for Brooks and Yana, the people here in the Zoom, and also anybody who might be following the stream or watching the recording. Feel free to get a journal or something to write on with you to record anything that may be moving through you as we continue through the workshop. And then of course, we'll leave space for sharing out loud or in the chat. And we're gonna start by asking a couple questions just to get an idea of who you are. And we'll ask people streaming and watching the recording to follow along. And there are gonna be some points where we ask you to close your eyes and raise your hand if you're a yes to the question. So we'll ask people streaming and watching the recording to also close your eyes in those moments too, in an effort to respect confidentiality. Aaron, you wanna take it away on the questions?
Yeah, well, I just want to honor a couple of things that, with tech issues, we're going to have less interaction. So I want to also, shift a little bit in a moment about having a discussion as well here that I think will add a ton of value to those that may watch this in post. I just want to name that as a part of the outline of discussion. So I just want to invite that into the space as we go into the questions. And also want to name that one of the things that I want to do to set up kind of this, not only these topics and questions, but the kind of the whole container of what we're in right now. And that is, I want to allow us to take a moment in the context of we look at an issue this overall issue of racism, and slowing it down. Somebody say, what do you mean by slow it down? Does it mean you talk real slow? What does that mean to slow something down? And the analogy story I want to just lay in here as a tool to kind of get a sense of what we're trying to do. And that is, if I don't know if any of you all potentially have flown in a plane, maybe not recently, but historically, flown in a plane over a forest. If you ever flown over a forest, you can probably see for miles, if you go up northwest, just beautiful miles and miles of forest, and it's gorgeous and it's amazing, but you just kind of get a kind of a bird's eye view literally of that forest. But if you ever take a car and drive a car through the forest, you can see it much more in detail. If you go to the redwoods or sequoias or any other forest, you'll see it a little more detailed. And it's a lot clearer and more intimate than the plane, but it's still pretty distant. And you might pull your car over, get out of your car, and walk into the forest. That's what we look at. We look at the topics and the trauma story as that forest. And sometimes in these topics, we kind of fly over the top and go, oh, that's an interesting topic, and keep going. Every once in a while, we might even get in a symbolic car and drive through the topic. And hopefully today in our discussion, we want to encourage us to get out of the car symbolically and walk into the forest. And if we're lucky, we might take off our shoes and really go into the forest and feel grounded in that space of the story. So whatever topics we come up with, our desire symbolically is to get out of the car and to walk into the story. We'll call it a trauma story, into racism, into a hurt. And so that's the invitation we have. And I put a cell phone number in the chat box. So if you watch this video post, or even right now, you want to text me, this number is committed for you to reach out via me. You can get all to, I watched this months from now, text that number about your feedback and your conversation. I know this is a marathon reach, and some folks might get this video weeks or months after this moment, but I just want to give that tool to adapt to maybe you not being in this moment present. If you're here in this moment, you can utilize that number as well and text me and reach out to me. Text is probably the most efficient way for me to be able to access your comments or your thoughts or even your questions or concerns. Just want to name that as a tool that's here as a resource. I know emails are great, but I'm always on the go and I get a ton of emails, but text cuts through the email barrier. So I just want to have that as our setup. I want to also add to, I'm going through my list here. There's a couple of things I would like us to consider and kind of the overall goal today. And today we're going to be talking a lot about a word I use a lot, but people have different definitions of it, is positionality. And when I talk about positionality, it's not just the positionality of you individually, which is important, but also there's a collective positionality. And so for me, we're going to be talking about throughout today what positionality is, how it's defined, and how we can hold it. And we actually recorded a podcast yesterday that should be ready tonight or early tomorrow morning. We also can drop that into email for you all to have even deepen into that idea of positionality. But one of the first things I would like to start with is, I believe, Britania, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said that Oregon Country Fair is like 50 years old, is that, or something like that? Yeah, 50 years old. And so I would ask some curiosity of, if we had this in this room right here for a moment, how much have we talked about racism over the last 50 years? What kind of questions have we come up with, have ran into over the last 50 years? And I would like to start like 2 years ago, because I think the last 3 years is a pretty intense in time to talk about race. But before the last 3 years, what was the topic? How did you all come up? Some of y'all been here more than 3 years maybe, or whatever. How did you all talk about race? What came up at that time before the flashpoint of the last 2 years or 3 years? Do you have a sense of what kind of topics have came up that you all witnessed or heard through rumors, if you want to say rumors, but just through the grapevine? Just want to open that up to anyone that what y'all have noticed over the years of the Oregon Country Fair. Yes.
I've noticed almost a lack of conversation about race growing up there anyway, and kind of this feeling of, oh, we're hippies, we're alternative, we don't really need to cover that because we already know we don't want to be racist kind of concept, you know, which is sweet, but ends up being a little more nice than good, you know. I know personally, the small space that I have a little bit of control over, we started creating an ancestor altar a few years back and included, this was like the earlier Black Lives Matter movement, like more 2014 rather than 20. And we started including images of those that were murdered by police, gun violence, and then also images of just kind of people that maybe martyrs is one word, or just kind of ancestors, anyone from like Bob Marley to King, or, you know, Martin Malcolm, whatever, as well as personal people that passed at FAIR, and just kind of trying to create a little bit of like reverence for the bigger struggles that aren't super visible at FAIR. Like people don't necessarily worry about police murdering people at FAIR, but it's obviously a serious national issue. So I know there's little sections like that I've kind of tried to bring some light around certain race issues, but I do feel a lot of it's kind of a little more in the ignoring, maybe that's the wrong word, you know, just not talking, not bringing it up is what I've known.
That's huge. Yes, Brooks, thank you.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. And it's almost like an active sort of, it's a not racism instead of an anti-racism. And it's, you know, I don't see color was a very big thing, and that's a deliberate thing. It's a kind of like, and one of the reasons you don't see a lot of color is because the place is whitewashed. I mean, it's like mainly white people. And so, yeah, you really don't see a lot of color there. And I think really the first time, unless you were a Black person who had their wristband cut off their wrist by security, the first time the organization really woke up to race at all was when we tried to erect a totem pole, and we received pushback from the tribes because it's not appropriate for what I see as obvious reasons, but many did not. And that was the first time the organization was like, whoa, maybe we have a race problem. And that was, I think, 6 years ago. And so there were some conversations happening, but they were nascent. And you're right, in the last, especially year and a half, it's really accelerated. Thank you.
That is so helpful. I know, Britania, you have some context on that too, but I just want to share. Anyone else want to share anything else? I know it's a small group here, so we'll give space for anyone else to share twice. Oh, I thought of something while Brooks was sharing or whatever it might be. I just want to make sure we're getting all the best we can with the sample knowledge we have in the room. We want to just get into what we can notice. We know we don't have the thousands and thousands of folks' voice at this moment, but we want to just get a sense. If you're listening to this video or watching this video later from now, there's a text right there in the box. Text me and be like, oh, I remember back in 1995, we had a big, thing we talked about race was great. And then people stopped it. If you have a memory, that's valuable right there in the chat box. Text me. I'll be engaged in this conversation until I get to see you all in person next year. I'm planning on being there in person. So I'm invested in us being able to make this space as safe as possible because I plan on attending. So that being said, we work hard. I might bring some friends, a little bus load up here. And let's do it. Integration's happening. All right, we'll get ahead of ourselves. Main point is anything else on your mind that you noticed over the last how many years you've been here, and it might not be like something like a public discussion, maybe even a personal conversation where people are having an unofficial topic or noticing. Anything you all noticed over the last 50 years? I mean, I imagine all of y'all have been here 50 years, but in your time, just want to check before I ask some questions. All right.
I just wanted to speak to the difficulty in how accelerated the conversation about race has gotten over the last couple of years in some circles, and in more circles than before, and how that often brings up a lot of urgency and a lot of desire to move quickly and swiftly, or quickly and deeply, to address these very real present dangers to some of us. And the difficulty comes in when an organization is not ready to move at that pace, or to even start with that reckoning, or from certain segments of an organization isn't ready for that.
That's so huge, Britania. There's a silence for like 40 years, and then something happens. It could be a political, it could be a shooting nearby, but something brings it to the surface. And then there's this urgency to try and fix 50 years, 40 years of complacency, we'll say, or lack of opportunity because of the privilege of a whitewashed container, or not having to do it because it's such a white controlled space. So then the urgency comes in that starts to outpace the actual capacity of the folks that have been in the organization, maybe as leaders or volunteers. That is so, so important. I don't think any of us could find a trainer and said, hey, I heard you're a really good trainer, one of the best in the country. This weekend, I was hoping I could lose 50 pounds. If we could just work out really hard, I'll come in early on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, out on Monday, I want to have that 50-pound drop. I don't care how good the trainer is, like I can't help you, right? Sometimes oppression, and particularly white control spaces, ask that level of success or progress over race. We haven't really talked about it, had any kind of tools in place over 50 years or so. We'll say 40, just to be kind of a casual number. And now we're going to do 50 years worth of work in a couple of years. It's going to take some, and it's kind of slippery slope too, because some folks be like, well, let's slow down. They slow down so much, they don't do anything. Or they accelerate so fast they cause all kind of harm and they go too ambitious. So I think it's really important to track that spectrum. And so when I talk about positionality, it's important. Anytime I'm consulting with an organization or even an individual, I try and say, can we see ourselves? Can we see ourselves? And right now, one information we have here, without having everyone's information here, as far as all the voices, we can say that race might not have been prioritized for 40 years. We're gonna make this assumption that race has not been, oppression and race has not been prioritized in 40 years. And we know it's 50 years old, we're gonna lowball it about 10 years to make sure we're accurate. If that's the case, the question is, as part of our identity is that we have a lot to notice in that fact alone. And so one thing I want to just highlight is if we've gone 40 years without addressing race, why? Now, answer my bill, white fragility, white privilege. Sure, those are short answers. That's flying over the top of the forest. White fragility, white control space. Anyone can figure that out. But if we were to get down at least to the car and go, what's deeper than just white fragility? To go 40 years. Rodney King was beaten. I mean, a whole lot's happened in 50 years. LA riots happened in 15 years. I think the New York riot happened. I mean, we've had a lot of opportunities nationwide. I mean, Clinton was like impeached and then elected. And then, I mean, a whole lot's happened in 50 years, right? I'm 38 and I know something's going on. I'm 39. I'm sorry, I just had a birthday. I'm 39 and I know stuff went down since 1982. So in 40 years, we go 40 years. The question is, LA burning, Rodney King getting beaten, didn't highlight a shift in the Oregon Country Fair. Why? Right? I imagine since 1990, or when Rodney King was beaten, I imagine some other things have happened around race. Some people have died maybe since then, but none of it got the attention or evoked any type of real shift around race. The question is, why? And so I want to just propose to the whole group here. I'm not pointing at any one person right now. It's a collective trauma story, positionality we're looking at here. So I just want to just give an opportunity of maybe why. And so I just want to hear some theories if y'all want to share. And Britania, you want to start us out? If not, anyone, I want to, this is an open topic. Why 40 years of zero? I say zero, we don't know, but minimum to zero interaction.
I would hazard a guess that it comes down kind of to that feeling that there isn't anything wrong because we are already counterculture. And I'm 33. My parents, as many people in my age range, came to Oregon in the 80s or so, some 70s. But that's when a bunch of revolutionary organizations were started. There's Saturday Market, Country Fair, Wow Hall, Whitebird. Also, there's like 5 or 7 of them. Growers Market is one of them. Toby's, I think. And so there was kind of this renaissance of sorts of like mainly white people, not only, I mean, my dad wasn't white, but, coming kind of doing this semi-revolution of, 180 degrees different from where they came from in terms of the mainstream culture, packaged food, whatever, and into this whole back to the land-ish hippie social justice focused thing. A lot of nonprofits were started at that time, a lot of Save the World type of organizations. You see that in the Growers Market building, there's like 80 above them, and it's all really great stuff. But I feel like because of that, it's somehow put a little bit of a blinder on us, because this community is full of people that are doing amazing work and nonprofit sector stuff and really trying hard. And so this assumption is made like, oh, we already know that, like we're a level of wokeness that surpasses, and we do, and we are, you know, compared to many places in the country, there is a deeper level of wokeness, and yet you can be as woke as you want to be and not necessarily based upon your experiences or your privileges, you know, really be fully welcoming to marginalized communities or even always listening to them. And I see that a lot in FAIR. Like, I'm sure there's a much bigger Latinx community or Latine community around Eugene than is represented at FAIR, right? Just little things like that. So I do feel like there's kind of an unsaid idea that we kind of are already there.
Ooh, right on point. Thank you for that history too. This little context of the evolution of that area, and you're onto something there. I think Oregon was ahead of California, the rest of the world, as far as back to nature, and we don't see color. I thought that was a standard 1995 response to race. Let's stop seeing color. I was a part of that group of like, okay, yeah, great. You don't see my color anymore. Right around into the 90s, we're like, hold up. This erasure is becoming problematic. It's stopping conversations. It's not actually addressing the issue. But I'll stop there. I want to hear any more thoughts. There's more thoughts on this topic, but it's a really good point of like the update didn't happen. Maybe that's something to think about. But I want to give Brooks, maybe if you want to speak to that at all, maybe you have some context. Just want to invite you, not demand, just invite, just in case you have something to speak to that.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Thank you. I think there's a few things. One is, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing at the fair. And so anti-racism work is not very fun sometimes. And it's a party. It's a party with a purpose, but it's a party. And so that there's an element of that. I think there's an element of, we have a culture of yes, yes, yes. And in many ways, saying stop doing something or no to something is kind of antithetical to who we are as an organization. And I think it's just like, quite honestly, not where we put our time. We were part, in the late 60s, we were kind of hand in hand with the civil rights movement and the queer rights movement. And, the hippies, all went separate ways. And so the gays went to deal with AIDS, the Black people went to deal with the civil rights movement, and the hippies got solar panels and organic food and all these other things implemented. And now you hear the Grateful Dead in Walmart, and so we did that, but we didn't do the work, the other work. And so I think we liked to pretend that we had, and it was fine for us, so therefore it was fine for everyone else. And it wasn't, and it's not. And these issues are not going to go away until they're dealt with. That would be my 2 cents.
That's like 5 cents. Britania, do you want to speak to your theory or anything that's moving through you? I want to make sure your voice is heard. I appreciate your what you're holding here. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you reaching for me. So that's why I really think about what you imagine.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate, Brooks, you bringing up that point of how common it is in these white hippie circles for the environmentalism bypassing to happen. I can't tell you how many times that I've been in a conversation about race and somehow the conversation gets switched to environmental justice, environmental activism, which is so important, but we're not talking about that right now. And yeah, I think I hadn't thought of it quite like what you were saying, like that it all kind of started in what you were saying, Brooks, like where it started all kind of together and then everybody went in their different directions. And yeah, I'm just thinking about how just in general, this water that we're all swimming in makes it especially hard in such a white state like Oregon with such a racist history to realize what takers we are with taking the elements of the counterculture from Black and Indigenous people, taking the very land that we're on from Indigenous people. And just not having that context of giving credit where it's due in such a white environment, white controlled environment.
Thank you for that, Britania. There's so many pieces here. Thank you, Brooks. I want to say your friend's name, is it Ayana? Is that how you say it? Or
Iana.
Iana, thank you. I'm practicing. Thank you for all y'all's input, because one of the questions when I consult with folks, I said, was racism a conversation at the beginning or the creation of your organization, or was it something that was just approached just recently? And oftentimes I might not have the facts of how old the organization is, but it's significantly different when you form something and you go, I really want this to be as accessible to as many people as possible. You build the foundation differently. When you establish a foundation for 50 years, 40 years, 20 years, and you don't have a foundation centering that equity, racism should be abolished, it sits on some major repair, right? It's a major repair. And so I think when I think of repair, one of the things I think about is capacity, right? What's the capacity? I have a fly swatter here because flies like nose bombing me right now. So I'm just know that I'm still focused, but have to, make space for things. But there's a place where we look at the context of how harm happens. Brooks, you said it really well. This is a party. We say yes, yes. And I thought we said yes, 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 yes to everything that is comfortable and is easeful. But no, no, it's those things that require a little bit of labor and adjustment of white privilege or resource. And I know that wasn't maybe the intention. If I sat down 40 years ago and said, you're saying no to Black people, I'm sure they'd be like, no, we want everybody. We just don't want to do anything to make it happen. But if they show up, we're going to love them. If they fight through all the trauma stories that go into the state and get here, we'll welcome them. But we're not going to do anything. We love them again, but we're not going to do anything extra beyond protecting what's here for us. And if anything I know about the Northwest, they aren't encouraging folks the outside coming in anyway. It's like, let's keep it to us, keep our little utopia intact. Even though we're taking utopia from somebody else, maybe. I don't know if it's utopia, but taking land from someone else. Now that we have access to the land, I won't hold on to. That's kind of the quiet narrative of white folks that have privilege and resource. They want to get real quiet and be like, don't come up here, city people, after we've been oppressed and really took advantage of the Native folks and whoever else they displaced. But that being said, I think the Oregon Country Fair has an opportunity. We're talking about slowing things down. We have an opportunity to really give ourselves what I call an honest assessment. And the first assessment I would like to recommend is think about as a group, and I know they're all here, but just in the context, we could speak to the foundation of Oregon Country Fair. The question I would be curious about is, what is your capacity, right? What is your capacity to start the shift? That's really important. Because I say that because we're talking about 40 years of not bringing equity as a center point, even though maybe in the heart, back in the back, diversity wasn't, they weren't opposed to it, but they were going to bring it up on their own and make it a center point. I think when I ask that question, it's like, well, that means that 40 years plus has gone by where probably no essential questions were being asked about Indigenous folks, about African heritage folks. So what does that mean? That's a habit. We're in the habit of not thinking about people of color. Britania spoke about this earlier about then this urgency now that to make up for 40 years in 6 months, in 2 years. And there should be some focus and maybe a sprinkling of urgency. But I think urgency, if I had to look at a muscle, if I had to look at a muscle of the Oregon Country Fair, and the muscle that we were going to use to hold and think about race, it's thin, it's not worked out. It has the yes, yes, fun muscle, that muscle's ripped. That muscle's like, they can move quick, it's flexible. But that muscle around race is atrophied. So we don't want to start just put a ton of weight on that muscle and be like, pull, come on, Country County, you can do it, you can do it. You're gonna pull some muscles, there might be some permanent damage if we push that muscle before it's ready to really push itself. And so I'm gonna speculate and say that muscle is atrophied. So what's important is we gotta create a space of what is the workout plan, if I can say that, the energetic workout plan, the questions that need to be asked, the consultant you need to consult with, the individuals you need to be bringing this conversation to help build that muscle up. Because a muscle of fun is ripped. Y'all know how to get down. I didn't even know about the Oregon Country Fair until I was doing something during the time period that was happening. People said, oh, I can't come to that event. It's like a holiday. I have to go to Oregon Country Fair. Like I don't know why you're trying to do something during that time, because that is the Oregon Country. It is a tradition that's in, it's like Christmas for some folks. In America, it's Oregon Country Fair in Oregon. It's the people that talk to me about hush and reverent tones. So I'm going to tell you how important that fair is to a lot of people, right? And I didn't even go. I can tell they told me. I was like, I need to find out what this Oregon Country Fair is about. I didn't even know. This is a couple years ago. Actually, like 4 years ago, exactly 4 years ago. So my point is that the impacts, the positive impacts, I want to keep intact. I want to encourage. I'm excited to be a part. What I want to figure out, and that this is what we can't answer. It's bigger than the 20. We stop at 4:45, so the 15 minutes we have remaining. Let's see. I'm gonna check my timer. Yeah, about 15 minutes. Time is blurring by. Almost 20 minutes we have remaining. It's bigger than that time frame, but I wanna at least put the seed in the ground here. I think the ground's fertile, but put the seed in the ground here of what are some simple questions that have not been asked, have not been set with in the last 40 years, 50 years. What's just not been asked? What's not been asked? And we have our positionality questions that we're gonna have. We have our little podcast recorded specifically for y'all. But I'm curious, it's like, what's now outside of we have our 6 questions here that we'll have for us to think about. But if we're gonna pick 1 or 2 questions in the room here, we put them in the chat box. We could put them, in that cell phone number I'm gonna keep telling y'all about. What simple questions are not being asked? Because the muscle's been atrophied a little bit. It's not been worked. What questions you might imagine have not been asked to the folks of the last 40 years that we can start asking now? And remember, we want to go from the forest, we want to drop down into the car at least when we ask these questions, a little bit deeper into the heart of what kind of questions you want to ask leading into Oregon Country Fair that have not been asked over the last 40 years. Or you might just imagine they haven't been asked. We haven't talked to all the thousands of folks yet, but in just your heart, what's not been asked? And feel free to put it in the chat box for everyone else here, or just verbalize it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about taking the time to ask what BIPOC people need within the context of fair, especially when we have new people coming in who are from marginalized identity, who hold marginalized identities, and taking really special care to hold those new people coming in and having an attitude of like, how can we help you get what you need, rather than not even asking or just talking about the reasons that they can't meet their needs, that we can't meet their needs.
Thank you, Britania. It's huge. Anyone else want to venture a question that has not maybe been asked?
I feel like something around like who's next, almost. Meaning, I feel like one of the issues with the society as a whole, and of course our organization is not exempt, is this lack of a peaceful transition of power, whether you're passing it on to the youth or marginalized communities or both. Like who's next? So we have all these, coordinators or backup managers, right? The bums or, people in the office, staff positions, committee members, board members, all these things. And I just wonder if there's much thought put into who's coming next, who's going to be, is my daughter going to be doing this in 10 years, 20, however many years, and how are we shaping our community then, into the future? Because I feel like if we put a thought process around kind of who's going to be holding this space the next 50 years, I would assume and hope with all the best intentions that that would be obviously including more brown people, more queer people, all of the, you know, different individualities that are somewhere within our organization, but aren't always expressed because they're not necessarily given that voice or that power passed on to them.
That was a great, that's like 100 questions embedded in that one question. Thank you. Anything else before I go through our positionality questions? Maybe Britania prepared for you all to think about questions that may not have been asked as well. So I want to give you all a little space.
I would ask, I guess, when are we going to do this? Like, you know, it's a who and a when. Like, we have this 2-year break, and if we're not going to do it now, I would venture to guess we're never going to do it. If we've never stopped, you know, it's been 50 years in a row of pulling this off, and it's the first time we've stopped. And if I feel like if we can't figure out how to do it in a more inclusive way that acknowledges the harm we've caused and seeks to rectify it and include others, then once we start going again, the wheels start turning, and the old wheels start turning the same way. I mean, how are you going to disassemble the car once it's driving again? And so, if not now, when? I guess the old question.
That's huge. For 5 of us, we're solving the world's problems right here in an hour. I really appreciate y'all's questions and y'all's thinking. Good minds here. But Tanya, I know you wrote some of these questions too, and I wrote some of these. Do you want to have me go on a question and you grab a question and go from there? Let's talk about it. Does that feel good for the last was it 20 minutes of our reach here? Does that feel okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. So we prepared 6 questions. We plan to send this out as some kind of little Google Doc with our podcast. Because we want to have you all some tools, but we want to make sure that we talk a little bit live here about it. I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. My clock here, it says 4:28. I'm in my head, we're going to stop at 4:45. Is that correct?
Yep.
Great. All right. So I'm going to start here. This is a micro positionality profile we made. We customized a 14-20 list down to 6. We thought we'd be realistic about our workshop and what's possible. But these questions would qualify as an intention for Oregon Country Fair to look at itself collectively, but really also individuals can ask themselves this question and come up with a kind of collective consciousness. That's whoever the board is, or leadership staff, or volunteers. I want to frame it. These are questions I think should be like that muscle I referred to. This is like nutrition for that muscle. The more we answer this question, we're going to get stronger and stronger and clear. And that what Brooks talked about is when we'll get clear. We'll be like, I don't know. We'll be like, oh, 3 years, 2 years, 6 months, 4 days, we'll have a date. First question, how do you emotionally defend yourself around topics of race? How do you emotionally defend yourself? It's important. Individually ask yourself this question. How do you emotionally defend yourself? Oregon Country Fair, how do you wiggle out of these topics? What's the emotional block that you put up when these topics come up? When a person of color gets bold enough to raise their hand and takes a sacrifice, I'm hurt, I'm harmed, I'm concerned. How do you defend? We're not even going to say it's right or wrong right now. We want to know if we can just name, how do you emotionally defend yourself? We'll pause there. Tanya, you want to take a question, or I can go to number 2 if you want.
Yeah, second question. When and how did your body get introduced to shame? This is such a powerful question. I feel like it can go so many different ways. And when I think about receiving it as a white person, a biracial person, as like my white, as I receive it with my whiteness, I think about how big shame is in keeping me from being willing to see the ways in which I uphold white supremacy. And, you know, tracking that in the trauma story of Oregon Country Fair. And then as I'm, you know, taking it in with my person of color identity, the shame that we learn to feel as people of color from, you know, the moment we come into this world and get introduced into otherness and whiteness.
Mm. Wow. Well said. Well said. Shame, because it comes up. Thank you, Britania. I'll do number 3. Who taught you, or how did you learn how to listen on topics around race and social justice? Who taught you to listen? How did you learn to listen around? This is really important because I look at racism and oppression. I don't care how good the book is, how good we are as facilitators. If for 40 years you haven't been listening, you know, all kinds of stuff happened in the world, but you just didn't listen. I imagine there's something that's taught you to ignore the pain everywhere else, including Oregon, that's happening around you. Something's taught you to ignore, and can we notice that? So how do we learn how to listen? Did white supremacy be our exclusive teacher of how to listen and who to listen to? How can we track, I now have more attention for folks of color, or I have only attention for a light-skinned, educated person that doesn't yell. That's I can listen, but they yell just a little bit, it's a little too loud. My ear shut off. Is that how your ear? How's your listening ear developed? This is so important in leadership, to volunteers, of how you've been conditioned to listen. I'll pause there. Do you want to do?
Yeah. 4th question. What are you willing to give up to ease BIPOC pain?
Ooh.
And I mean, I think we've just been talking about this throughout this whole workshop of how important it is for white people to ask this question of what are they willing to give up? Are they willing to give up all the power that they've worked so hard for, that they've earned, that's theirs?
I appreciate that question, but I know you really helped design that question. You said ease. You didn't say fix, complete ease. Just relief some of the pressure. Because I think it's maybe ambitious to think we can have zero pain, but we want to ease it, and that's worthy to reach for. I just want to really honor that design. Thank you, Britania, for that ease. Number 5, when POC show up to Oregon Country Fair, what is expected first from them? What's expected first from them? This is really important, because I think there's a way, especially when you have a 40-year history. I say 40 because I'm being soft for the last 10 years, but no, it's 50 years plus. So a 50-year history of white folks controlling the space. How do they expect people of color, BIPOC people, to show up? Do they expect you to show up quiet? Do they expect you to show up angry? Do they expect you to show up joyful? And I remember I asked the question, one of my iconic questions I asked for years and still ask, because it's relevant here. I asked folks, I say, what is your ideal Black person? They always look at me like, I'm not answering that question. But I ask that question because oftentimes they're not honest about what they're, well, my ideal Black person is someone that's not coming, they aren't angry. They don't cause any riffraff. I remember one person, a different organization in Oregon, I'm not gonna name them, but they said, my ideal Black person is a Black person that makes you forget that they're Black as quickly as possible. And I appreciate this white person saying that. I know the whole room was like that, like, oh, the whole room was like, they just said that. And it's real, because I imagine it's a possibility, I'm not saying this is true, it's a possibility that the Oregon Country Fair might have a quiet, unsaid expectation that the folks of color that show up to help them forget that they're Black as quickly as possible are the ones that get the little volunteer leadership gigs, the ones that get leadership. I'm not saying it's true, I'm saying it's possible that that's there. So the question is, what's expected? And this is for white folks really to track. This is not for the POC people in the Oregon Country Fair to think about. This is for white folks to really examine and go, do we have any expectations for any people of color that show up here? And I know some white people, Aaron, we have the same expectations for everybody. There's no different on the race. It's the same for everybody. Well, that's problematic. I was gonna get ahead of that trauma story. We don't have to interact with, so I'm just gonna know that that trauma's in the air, and I'm gonna bring it to the surface real fast and fix this narrative to get ahead of it with a name. That yes, all the white folks that showed up can have the same expectation, but the emotional calorie burn, the labor for a integration, right? Integration into a white space, right? Is a high calorie burn for folks of color. So it's not the same. Now, I want to be clear, I am not critiquing the closed optional swimming space. I think they are amazing to have a closed optional swimming space. But I was at another location in Oregon. I'm not gonna say the name because I love them all and I'm not trying to put them on blast here. And we were gathering, right? And it was all white people. It was 120, over 100 white people in the forest doing some back to nature stuff. Amazing. I was having a blast. And that little area of swimming, it said closed optional. I looked at my one other black person that I bring with me. I said, guess where we're not going? We're not gonna go swimming, right? And they're like, oh man, it's hot. I mean, it's not air conditioning. There's no air conditioning out there. It's like shade. There's not, the weather was decent, but it was like, it'd be nice to swim in the pool, but we're not gonna swim. And the white people were like, oh man, why aren't you gonna swim? You have a problem with the closed optional? I don't have a problem with the closed optional. But I checked my own positionality. I'm 6 foot tall, dark black, all right? Only black male in this entire 140. I'm the first black male to teach at this event in 25 years, right? That muscle's atrophied, right? And the ones that hung out with me the most were the children. The children were like, how you doing? They came to my workshop. The kids helped earth build. The kids hung out. Some adults came, but the majority were like 12-year-olds, 8-year-olds. And this swimming area, this is wild, folks. You know, I get it. These are families swimming nude out here, right? So I'm gonna slow this down for you. How if I got into the pool, right? I'm swimming around with no clothes on, right? I'm swimming. And a 12-year-old girl's no clothes on, she's swimming. Hey, Aaron, how you doing? I saw you worked. How you doing? I'm supposed to slow that down for y'all. I can't explain if someone, I know these are rewilders and wild folks and stuff. If they take a picture of that on a cell phone, they have iPhones or someone, or just document that, write it down. Brother swimming with a 12-year-old. Something's up. Something's up. I won't be talking to you right now if that happened. And it was likely to happen because it's a family. I think it's amazing. I'm not critiquing it, but as a black male, I gotta track my positionality. So oftentimes y'all be like, oh, we have this amazing, iconic swimming area closed optional, and black people can come too. They're welcome. There's no trauma there. What could go wrong, right? Have you thought about it? What kind of conversation have you had about black nude bodies and white bodies that haven't seen black folks maybe in 40 years or not? What if 40 black folks decided they wanted to come to Oregon Country Fair next year, right? And they all want to take off their clothes, hop in, I don't swim backwards, but hop in there, no clothes. Do you think it's possible that there's some harm that could be caused in that integration? These kind of questions that need to happen. So talk about expectations. Sometimes we'll think about expectations when we're in a white controlled space. And the expectation was that I could somehow go into this closed optional space and there might be zero harm to me and zero harm to anyone else by not being used to being around a black body with no clothes on or minimal clothes on, right? So my point is, expectations can be almost subtly put in place. I'm very clear. I got you. Go right ahead. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, that brings up to me what I was kind of going to say. I love that you segued that perfectly with a different event, because at Fair, what I see as a person of color with the expectation is that you are on display. And I am also, of course, a part of the entertainment crew, but just in general, because of the sheer whiteness, if you're one out of every, 150 people, there will be more eyes on you. And, if you're on stage, that's cool. But if you're just trying to go get some food or take a shower, I love the Ritz, but I did kind of stop going there because I was sick of, combing out my fro with all the people watching. And, it just is what it is. There's a different amount of eyes on you. And if without that understanding that maybe white body people don't necessarily understand, except for maybe when they're dressed up on stilts or, crazily sparkled out or multiple colors or the mud people or whatever, like that's how we are feeling all the time. Like I'm not on stilts, but I feel as if I'm on stilts. So I do have an underlying expectation of just being viewed that just happens out. And I think it's semi-natural, like you said, because white people that haven't seen that many different looking people are just gonna look, you know? But it is definitely an uncomfortable level when we are talking about integrating and inviting more POC and more BIPOC people to be involved. It's like, well, come on in to our fishbowl.
Yeah. Oh, snap. Preach. That's real. You're on display. That's an emotional calorie burn. We treat everybody the same. Britania, you want to grab the next question? We got like 4 minutes left, but all right. Yeah, we can get them in.
Yeah, so our last question is for people of color. What do you offer up? How do you present for your own safety, historically and presently? This is such a great follow-up to that last question and topic. And I mean, Aaron, I just love that story, the swimming story, that really just changed the way that I look at protecting myself and protecting others in white controlled spaces. And thankfully, like in that story, you were able to talk to the organizers and say you weren't going and why. And I'm sure that was really transformative for them too. But there are lots of situations where there is no space to talk to the people in charge, or that they're not listening. So yeah, what do we do to stay safe? How do we present ourselves to stay safe?
Thank you, Britania. These questions alone are a good 5 years of work that we could track. Just these questions alone, the 6 questions. We whittled it down for this container here, but each one of these questions begs for us to ask many more baby questions attached to them. I hope that everyone here that hears this audio recording, that sees that number, could text us, text and engage on this topic. You might have questions you might have questions about the questions. You might have modifications. Yes, Britania.
I don't know if that number will be on the recording, so we can just say it out loud.
Yeah.
So this is not the number for folks to reach out with questions, requests for support, especially people of color. If you want to reach for us and receive support after engaging here, the phone number is 760-885-6740. And I'll give that one more time, 760-885-6740.
Thank you. Woo, we made it. 45 minutes, all the tech challenges we hope to reach for y'all. Britania, thank you so much for leading with me today.
Yeah.
And it means a lot to work with you and to hear your voice and your thinking on this. Powerful, thank you, it's an honor.
Yes, thank you so much, Aaron, for accepting the invitation to come back this year. And thanks, Brooks and Yana, for joining us on this little mini workshop. Close-knit, tight-knit.
Yes. Thank you all for your voices that made this thing go so much deeper and broader with y'all's hearts here. So thank you, Brooks. Yana, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys are wonderful.